Good afternoon. And today we have an honor of interviewing of Dr. Julie Sadove-Lopez. And she's joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. Good afternoon, Julie.
Good afternoon.
And in our intimate conversation, we're going to talk about how dentist can reinvent herself. Dr. Sadove-Lopez reinvent herself from traditional dentistry, and she's going to share her journey into something beyond traditional dentistry, into airway, whole body health, sleep, breathing, whole body connection space. She become, we can call it health coach, or she help not only patients to navigate the treatment journey, and she's going to tell us how and what this journey is all about, but also she help practitioners to get into that collaborative space. What the head is not different part of another body, but actually, part of the same body, and it's seriously affecting everything, and mouth included. And also another thing about Dr. Sadove-Lopez, she is early reader, or we can call it B reader of my book, Breathless. And she read a lot of chapters, and she did a very serious work reading them maybe once, maybe twice, maybe even more, to really give me the feedback. So she's gonna share that early feedback with you, what you're gonna make a decision if it's worth it for you to learn from my book, what took me that many years to write. So again, thank you very much to our audience. If you have trouble sleeping or sleep next to snoring partner, this program is going to be for you, because we're going to talk about how dentists can help your sleep more restorative and your kids sleep more restorative and get your days full of energy rather than full of fatigue. And if you're a medical professional who may be on the verge of burnout and want to reinvent themselves, we're going to listen to reinvention journey, but on a professional level. Julia gonna help us to put these puzzles together, how she see that, and what health coach and person in her role, how that person can help to put the puzzles of sleep and breathing disorders together for a lot of people. So my first question to you, Julia, what exactly happened? How it feels fundamentally different from being a traditional dentist? And also, I want to introduce everyone to Julia Bio. She, just like me, finished a dental school. But before the dental school, she was very interested in biology, oral medicine, so she had a lot of knowledge. And she also affiliated with the Brief Institute and learn a lot about frenectomy and early orthodontic intervention. And she had wonderful time assisting Dr. Kevin Boyd, who we interview on our channel. And she's now created a platform called Oris Wellness, and she does one-on-one coaching sessions with parents or with professionals, with medical or dental professionals, how to change the trajectory. So my first question to you, Julia, what exactly happened? Why did you change that trajectory? And what you found in that new space? What really satisfies your soul?
Yeah, that is such a good question. The more time I've spent kind of in this deviation from chairside clinical dentistry, the more time I've talked to others who felt like me. And you mentioned the word burnout. I think burnout is a real part of the story for a lot of providers, a lot of professionals. For me, it started early in dental school. I think my worst health of my life was like during the years while I was in dental school. We don't necessarily prioritize ourselves. We're always kind of trying to do what we can do to get to the next step. And that wasn't the case for all of my classmates. I noticed that there were differences, right? So some of my classmates were really good at, if they already had kids, they designated a certain amount of time to get back to their family. But for me, that period of time was really all-consuming, and I sort of let that carry through into my first few years practicing as a dentist as well. And I think it's something where there would be days where I wouldn't drink water all day. Like you have to be able to set some good boundaries for yourself. And I wasn't good at that. So the first thing that I would say is if you're kind of living out of alignment, or if you don't have your own kind of internal compass that is guiding you to make sure that you're living with intention to support yourself, then it's going to catch up. And that's a common conversation I've had with a lot of dentists, a lot of different providers that have sort of pivoted into different parts of dentistry as a result, because you can't keep doing what you're doing if you're not kind of finding what motivates you and finding a good balance with different things. So that was kind of my own journey, was trying to understand. I didn't want to be doing what I was doing 10 years from now. I had these conversations with other dentists who had felt the same way. And I sort of took a step backwards to say, what is my favorite part of what I'm doing? And for me, it was education. And it was having those conversations with patients and really helping them understand what they could do and what the problems were. And I had an amazing network in Chicago, which was really helpful, because I kind of joked that I was a professional referring dentist, because I would say, go see this person and go see that person. I just had a lot of resources available to me. And so it was easy to send people onward. I realized that that's not the case for every community geographically. Depending on where you are, you're going to have different resources. But for me, I just loved the part where I sat down and I got to educate families. And so in kind of taking a step back and deciding, am I going to leave the field of dentistry, or am I going to find a way to move forward that feels aligned with something I want to be doing in 10 years? It was building off of that concept of education.
That's a beautiful, I think, I always bring that topic up, especially now when people, talking about AI and how AI forcing us, a lot of people forcing on the edge of burnout because they feel it's a lot of uncertainty. But for me, who trying constantly reinvent something, I feel, it was always the different professions. We got to advantage of that, or automatization of that, and then the new profession emerged. And I would say the airway or health coach, that's a new profession.
Yeah, there are so many health coaches in general, but when it comes to dentistry, you never hear someone offering their services as a dental coach. So it's an interesting opening in the market for sure. And I think by and large, I would say that a lot of myofunctional therapists have sort of stepped into that role as a quarterback for a lot of families. But the problem still exists that many people don't even know what myofunctional therapy is. So if they haven't found their way there yet, having someone else who can kind of land in as this sort of director or coordinator to help educate these families. And it's not about me telling a family what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's really about helping guide them on their own unique path towards what solutions are available, what's aligned, what's appropriate, and what they feel is going to be the next best step.
So just for my audience, for you to understand, it's a new field what Dr. Julia Sadove-Lopez is doing. She is guiding families on a correct health path, trying to design it, customize it for this specific family, what they need on that, let's call it airway journey. Because I said many times in my, podcast, what evolutionary, unfortunately, modern humans are not in the best breathing pattern as of now. But the good news, we can do something about that. And that's the person who can help to start their journey. But, fortunately, unfortunately, breathing is our number one priority. And if we don't do it, how to do it right, all the disease just gonna be like a pierce on the bud, right? We can say like a necklace. They're gonna be like a necklace in the health. So somebody like Julia help navigate that journey. But the second thing what she does for medical professionals who just like her feel kind of on the edge of burnout, she help them to find a collaborative network and find the path not to end up in a mental institution, we can say.
Something like that.
Maybe it's a little bit too much to say, but it's like a final destination. But there are a lot of stops before that, what as a dentist, as somebody who is in a field can totally relate, and we all go through that unfortunate period in our life when we feel frustrated and we're ready for reinvention. So then Julia come in. But now I'm going to ask you my favorite part of the interview. Julia, I have to illuminate Julia role. You know, my book it's written by me, but it's many voices like Dr. Sadove-Lopez, who contribute to that book as my backer. You know, thank you very much for that. But also as a suggestions, as a B reader, early reader. She did not read the whole book. She read several chapters or many chapters, and she expressed her suggestions, what I can improve them and make it more useful for my audience. So I'm going to ask you the first question about the book. When you read the chapters, did you find what something changed for you? And you think you might be able to bring it to your clients or patients, we can call them, after reading the book?
Yeah, on a personal level, I think it was just a lot of validation for me as someone who's already acting in an airway space. I think it really, your book has a phenomenal kind of new approach that I'm excited for people to see. It's something different than a lot of other books that I've read in the space, and by really integrating a really personal story. And we're diving deep into a portrait of a family and what their experience is like. And I think that it's going to make it much more approachable for families. One of the hardest things for families to understand is sometimes you'll bring up a symptom or something like, what's the big deal with mouth breathing or otherwise? And that's a hard thing to get people to understand when you start giving them the science behind it. That's of course important and a part of the story. But when we look at the more human element of things, I think it can translate better. And a lot of times I've had conversations with families too, or with other providers, where I personally have a hard time taking an alarmist tone when we're talking about if things go untreated, this is where someone's going to end up. But the reality is sometimes we can look ahead at what a parent's experience is and know that if we don't intervene early, that a child's trajectory may be headed that way. And so I think it really helps to paint together some of these pictures that can be hard conversations to have with families that you're supporting. And so I'm excited for those to come to light. That's probably my biggest thing that I'm excited about. But when it comes to being able to use it as a tool for families to get sort of that understanding on that level.
That's true. That's how, yes, this book has a lot of human elements. It has a lot of human story, because my mentor, Dr. Barry Chase, and, you know, I feature him on the channel as well. He said to me, if you want to give something to people, it has to be entertaining. It cannot be dry, wonderful facts, which, you know, of course I know because I write the scientific articles and I have to support with scientific research. But then for me personally, when I read those articles, I have to chain myself to the table and have a lot of strong will to finish it. And I don't want people to feel that way with my book, what they have to chain to my book. I want them to brief this message in without even knowing that. That's the idea, and thank you for expressing it so well. But I want to also ask you, when you read the book, if you find most real or even uncomfortable what we don't talk about in dentistry, what you find in a book.
I think for me, it wasn't as much an uncomfortable discovery as much as painting a perspective for providers to keep in mind too. I think in the book, you appear as a sort of lifeline to some of your patients. And sometimes we forget when we're busy seeing patient after patient after patient in a practice, sometimes we forget how big of a deal this is in their world when it becomes just a part of our own routine. And I think it's a good reminder for people, if they haven't thought of it that way, to spin it around and just sort of understand how the patient carries this through the rest of their life. And that's a conversation I just had with a family I was working with. They had, in a medical capacity, moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. And for the first time, a doctor was asking questions about someone's diet, and that was new for them. And, they made all these changes through the year, and they came back so excited to tell the provider about all the changes they made. And the provider in that situation didn't even remember having suggested some of these changes. And so sometimes I just think we really lose sight of how big this is to the patients. And so that would be one thing that I think your book, it's not done in an uncomfortable way, but it's done in a way that kind of makes you pause and reflect and make sure that you remember there's really a 360-degree story happening instead of just a single slice or a single snapshot in a given moment that we get.
I want to actually tell my audience what Julia have a strong Instagram account, what I follow. And I want to bring something alive. I watched the video. I don't know who made the video, but it was on your site, how our kids having hard time breathing through the straw. That was wonderful. The person who was in the video walking around with a straw, breathing through the straw, and she had a hard time, breathing through the straw. And guess what? Sometimes a lot of serendipity happened in that. Yesterday, I had a patient, my adult patient, who was with 4 bicuspid extraction and 4 wisdom teeth extraction, very common, person in my practice, person with a tiny jaw, normal person, but with a tiny jaw. And I opened this 3D scan and I saw that straw. I saw that straw in the real life of the person who had orthodont, who didn't wear the retainer. Oh my God. And everything what was corrected, even without a teeth, of course, moved back again to even smaller space. So now, of course, she has a severe sleep apnea. So she kind of was like a hero of my book, but not a hero of my book, but somebody who I met in a real life. So whatever those videos, yes, they ring the bell. They make sense. And that's why I wrote the book. But I want to ask you, when you read it, do you feel it's a human story or more like a medical story?
I think it weaves both together in a really strong way. There's a lot of practical medical information weaved into it, but it's done in a human way. And so it's done, again, like I said, I've read a lot of the medical books that are out there, and it's done in a really unique way. So I would say it's a human story with a lot of medical information weaved throughout.
Did you remember anything what kind of you found in you? I know you didn't read all the chapters, but from the chapters kind of surprise you maybe?
You know what? I will say not a surprise, but there was a feature that I liked that was in a recent chapter that I read that I think was, again, an example of sort of solid practical advice. Was a character in your book is sort of resistant to the treatment option that they've been provided. And there's some dialogue about incorporating the person loves technology. So here are all these sort of wearables and things we can do. So finding kind of the right motivations. I think that ties into my perspective as someone who relies on coaching. Sometimes that is what you have to do, is you have to find what's going to keep these people motivated. And so I don't think necessarily surprises, but I liked these little pearls and these little pieces of wisdom that are weaved in the story.
Actually, I remember your comment, and it was a great comment about wearables. Mm-hmm. Wearables, we believe they should be great accountability coaches. Actually, I didn't find it in a real life. but I still
Interesting.
believe it. But who would you recommend this book to? You would recommend it to patients, or you would recommend it to clinicians?
I think I'm most excited to recommend it to patients first, because I think, like I was saying before, some of these things are really hard concepts to make sure that families are understanding. And I think through this more human storyline, it's going to be making some of those concepts more tangible for them. But I also definitely think that providers are going to see value in reading it. And for me, like, again, just providing some perspective on our role as members of the care team and getting a more complete view of what's going on. So I'm excited for both.
No, that's like my book going to be published in May or June. And with people like Julia, I really hope it's going to make a difference in other people's life. So thank you very much for helping me. And I highly recommend my audience to follow Julia, Dr. Julia Sadove-Lopez on her Instagram. And we're going to put the information about Julia. And if you have questions about your airway journey, or maybe about your dental journey, or maybe about your health journey, or maybe as a dentist you want to avoid the burnout and reinvent yourself, I highly recommend you to get in touch, and she will, advise with a lot of sincerity and from her experience.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.